The Washington Wizards got hot at the end of the season when it looked like they were pretty much left for dead in the Eastern Conference. And now they are fighting for their playoff lives as they play for that final seed in the Eastern Conference. Right here with me to talk about the Wizards is Wizards fan Colby Price, really coming in clutch and talking about the Wizards. How did you become a fan of the Wizards, especially when it's so easy for everybody in the area of the Eastern Shore to be bandwagoners?
Yeah, I'm a local fan. I like all the Baltimore sports team, Ravens, Orioles. And then when it comes to hockey and basketball, I chose DC. So as a young kid, grew up Gilbert Arenas, Antoine Jameson, Caron Butler, those guys when I was younger. And that's just been my team ever since.
What is your biggest Wizards memory? What stands out to you?
Gilbert Arenas has a lot. He hit so many clutch shots. I can remember one. There was a game I think we played the Jazz back when Darren Williams was really good, and he hit a buzzer beater. But I think my favorite Wizards memory would be John Wall, Game 6 against the Celtics to force a Game 7 a couple years ago. That was probably my favorite one.
What is the most unique piece of Wizards-related memorabilia that you have?
I have a Wizards District Rui Hachimura jersey. I got it as soon as Rui got drafted. I liked Rui. Rui's who I wanted in that draft originally. So I immediately went and got a District Rui jersey.
Looking at the season, I know the first thing that comes to mind is the trade of John Wall for Russell Westbrook. And I know, of course, a little more collateral came with the draft picks down the road. But when you heard the news of John Wall getting traded to Houston for Russell Westbrook, what were your initial thoughts, and have they changed since the season concluded?
That is a great question. I remember I was at work that night. I was working a night shift that night, and when I got the alert, I'm not going to lie, I was angry. John Wall is my favorite player ever. I was upset. I didn't like it at the time, especially since we had to give up a draft pick, but I've come to see that it worked because Russell Westbrook is a player unlike any other player in the NBA. And he is one of a handful of players that can take over a game and will their team to win. And he showed that at the end of the season. We don't have a great roster. And the fact that the way they started and they're in this position is Bradley Beal is great and all, but I think it's all Russell Westbrook right now.
You know, when I saw the Wall trade, and I know I kept hearing about the Wall trade over the past couple seasons, and I just keep thinking, this is Chris Webber all over again. It's the worst case that could occur. We're going to get a Mitch Richmond type player for John Wall as he recovers. Even though it's an Achilles injury, you never know how he's going to recover. But Westbrook, him recovering from the injury, that made things look a little like, did we get damaged goods? And then, of course, he turned it on, especially come the last couple months of the season, which made things look a little bit better. Was there a point of the season that you were optimistic that the Wizards were going to make the playoffs, period?
No. In the East, you can say make the playoffs. I always thought there was an outside chance because in the East, as they are 34 and whatever now, that's enough for the 8th seed. But a chance to actually be competitive in the playoffs, not really until they went on that big win streak at the end of the season. Before that, I was all on board with tanking essentially and just trying to get a better draft pick. But I learned that when you have Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook, you can't really tank. Those are two players that they want to win and they are good enough to help their team win. You have to try to win with those guys.
Was there a point where you were really concerned that they're not making the playoffs and things are going to get a little ugly? Of course, Scott Brooks in the final year of his contract, and I know a lot of fans weren't sold on his work as a head coach, especially knowing that it was a ploy to get Kevin Durant to come to Washington and that failing miserably.
Yes, I'm still at the point where I'm very worried about that. Even if they win this game, as I said before, with Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal, they could beat anybody. I don't think they would beat the Sixers, but I think there's a possibility that they maybe take a couple games. But I don't care if they go on to win the finals. Scott Brooks needs to not be the coach next year. He proved time and time again he has terrible rotations. He doesn't ever draw up plays for scores. He's awful defensively. And he doesn't develop young stars. We have Rui. He wasn't giving Denny playing time, that's another lottery pick that you need to focus on getting developed. He wasn't giving him playing time. It's time for a different coach in DC, whether they make the playoffs or not.
Who would you think would be a suitable replacement for Brooks, win, lose, or draw?
I've seen a lot of names thrown out there. One person that I've wanted is Sam Cassell because of the ties he has to the area and all that stuff. And he's been coaching for winning organizations, whether it's assistant or whatever, recently. I think he'd be a really good get. I honestly don't know at this point, but I think anyone but Scott Brooks at this point would be an upgrade just for the change of the guard, essentially.
So far, with Tommy Sheppard taking over as president of basketball operations, and I know there were a couple of dalliances, everybody was looking at Masai Ujiri and, of course, Denver's president of basketball operations before they decided to stick in-house. Looking at Sheppard's first year as president of basketball operations, what are some of the pluses and minuses of his tenure so far?
It's really hard to judge that after just 1 year. Like, I think Denny was obviously the best pick, and that was a pick that was essentially handed to him on a silver platter. He couldn't have got that wrong. It was a guy that was projected to go a lot higher. He fell to him. So I'm not going to judge that one way or another. That was the pick to make there. If he would have made a different pick, that would have been a problem. And then the free agent signings, Robin Lopez has shown signs of being a great offensive player, but he's not great defensively. Neto is the same way. It's just really hard to judge that after just 1 year. My problem isn't as much with him as it is with Scott Brooks.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I know that everybody was talking about last year in the bubble, Davis Bertrand's having his run at the end of the regular season, and then the game against Boston, everybody just saying how much of a defensive liability. But again, that lies on Brooks, because if you know you need someone to make a stop, you can't risk putting an offensive threat who's a defensive liability out there constantly. And then again, it doesn't help that he struggled that game. I mean, if he even hits half of his shots, they probably win going away. You know, anybody can just ask for an average game. No one's asking for anything exceptional. Of course, you never know how a player is going to be. And sometimes you're always rolling the dice because it could have been a lot worse in a game. But going into that, what more do the Wizards need on their roster?
They need a 3-and-D guy. I don't know who is available. I haven't really looked of what's going to be available. I've seen them being linked to DeRozan maybe in free agency, but that's not going to really help this team with what they needed. The way Westbrook plays, he needs to attack and find shooters, and they just don't have shooters right now. Their only shooter is Davis Bertans, and he has just been bad of late, and they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league, and they're one of the worst defensive teams in the league. So if you go find a 3-and-D guy somewhere that you can plug in to play in that lineup with Russ and Brad, they'll be fine. Because you also get Thomas Bryant coming back next year. You have Gafford, hopefully, and then Rui. And if you can get a 3-and-D guy to play with those guys, they should be fine.
I mean, if a Kelly Oubre is available, that might be the fit. Of course, whether that reunion occurs, who knows? Yeah. But, you know, there's so many things. I mean, You never know how that'll really turn out. But looking at the playoffs, who do you think in the Eastern Conference the Wizards match up the best with?
That's a great question. Obviously, with the way they played the Nets this year, I would have said the Nets because they don't play defense as well. We're a high-scoring team. They're a high-scoring team. We both give up a lot of points. It'll just be a track race, and those are the games that I feel like the Wizards have a chance. But no matter what, I don't want to play Kyrie, Harden, and KD. It doesn't matter if they're the best matchup or not. So I think of the top three teams, the team I would wish the Wizards could play would probably be the Bucks, just because if you can limit Giannis with maybe Gafford or Rui, then we have a chance to score against them. But like a team like the Sixers, they're so good defensively. We don't have anyone that can stop Embiid. So I feel like they're one of our worst matchups, honestly, at this point.
Looking at the resume that Russell Westbrook brought into Washington and the frantic number of triple-doubles, the question is, how long can he keep up this pace? And does it marvel you, especially seeing how really in his first 6 years, the guy only had like 8 triple-doubles, and then all of a sudden he just exploded into becoming this triple-doubles machine?
Yeah, I think in the beginning of the year, he clearly wasn't healthy. I think that had a lot to do with it. It's coming out, he had maybe like a quad tear or something like that from last year in the playoffs, which is why he was bad in the playoffs last year. and then he struggled in the beginning of this year. But I think what we're seeing now is healthy Russell Westbrook. That's just what he is. For some reason, there are people out there that don't like how he plays. They say he's not efficient enough, but he plays with heart and he makes your team better. That's just what he does. When he's healthy, he makes whatever team he's on better. And so I have marveled at that because John Wall was one of my favorite and he averaged like 25 and 10. And I thought that was amazing. But then you also add the rebounding aspect to that and him being the greatest rebounding guard of all time. And there are games when he is the best rebounder on the court, big or guard. He's the best on the court. And it helped. And I don't care if anyone says it's stat padding or not. It helps the team when you get rebounds. It just does.
Yeah, and I even look at the Celtics game. He was there under basket getting those rebounds while the big men were already sort of going the other way, which really tells you that, again, maybe it's just the style nowadays. Everybody's assuming the shot's going down, but you got to have somebody back there to prevent the offensive rebounds. Looking at the NBA Finals, who do you have coming out of the West? Who do you have coming out of the East? Who will win the finals, and then how many games?
I am a huge LeBron fan. They played bad last night, but I still personally think if LeBron and Anthony Davis are healthy, they're going to make it to the finals. I don't have faith in the Clippers until they show me something else. I don't see it. Same with the Jazz. They've been good in the past. Then they lose in the playoffs. The Suns are out of nowhere are a good team, and that has a lot to do with how good Chris Paul is, but then Chris Paul can never get over that hump. And then the Nuggets, if they still had Jamal Murray, it would be closer. But without that guy that you have Jokic who can hit shots in the clutch, but without that guard that Murray was that could just hit those like ice in his vein shots at the end of the game, I think it's going to be tough for them in a 7-game series. So right now, I'm still picking the Lakers out of the West. And out of the East, I don't see how it can't be the Nets. You have 3 absolute superstars and maybe 2 of the best 5 players in the league that you're automatically the favorite. So I think that's my finals matchup right now. And I think the lack of defense will hurt the Nets. And I think the Lakers are going to win that series in 7 games.
What are ways people can reach out to you on social media to talk Wizards basketball and Baltimore, Washington sports as well? And do you have any shout outs or anything to promote?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter, same username at Colby2710, COLBY 2710. And nothing really to shout out right now, but I love to talk sports. I'll debate anybody about sports. So if you have an opinion or a question or anything you want to talk about, I'm down to listen and talk about it.